So we've been talking about the qualities of a Christ follower, and we've been using Romans 12 as our foundation, and we began the journey by talking about how we had to have a transformed mind, and how that word transformed means renovated, a different mind than the world has, and the only way that can happen is if God does it through us, and we're open to letting that happen. Then the second week, Jay talked about how the gifts and the talents that we have are to be used for the kingdom, and the kingdom should have the first priority in everything in life, and the kingdom of Jesus should stand out. Last week we talked specifically about connected what life as a Christ follower begins to look like. And again, it was not the objective to try and be those things, but the objective to chase after Jesus, and those come out of us naturally. And then today, as we wrap up Romans 12, we're going to talk about the one that I like the least. Okay? And I'm just going to tell you up front, this is the one that's hardest for me, and it's probably hardest for most people. And if it's not hardest for you, I am excited for you, because we're talking about returning evil with good. Okay? So, in other words, there we go. So, in other words, instead of getting even or getting revenge, when people do things that harm us, we return that act or that action with good. Okay? And so, in the passage, one of the things that we're supposed to do is not seek revenge. Now, let me just quick story on why revenge doesn't work well. All right? So I grew up in an athletic dorm, and there's one rule in an athletic dorm: you shall have no mercy on anyone. Okay? So one day, a group of guys snuck into my suite mate's room, and they glued everything in his desk to the desk with super glue. So every pen, every coin, every paper, money, every notebook, so it was stuck there. He couldn't get it off. So what do? You get back, right? So he found the biggest trash can he could find. He filled it with water and other things that I won't tell you about. He leaned it up against their door in their dorm room. He knocked on the door and ran. They opened the door, and this stuff went everywhere. So that should end it, right? Well, of course not. So they get back into his room, and they begin to super glue things in his closet to the floor. And the revenge also had to do something involving a snake and a mouse. But I'll let you figure that out on your own. And so it was really about to get bad, and somehow the people that ran the dorm found out about it, and they intervened and stopped it. But see, here's the problem with revenge, is we never get it right. Okay, when someone hurts us, we overhurt them back. Right? And so when we go through this and we read this passage, understand that we have to come to a point where we can trust the great I am to get it right. Boy, and that's so hard, because sometimes I want to be God's instrument of wrath, right? Okay, so let's look at these last few verses of Romans 12, and I ask you to turn with me there. And here's what he says, Romans 12, 17 through 21, page 1138 if you're using the Pew Bible. Romans chapter 12, 17 through 21. All right, and Paul writes this. He says, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." There's a lot of things there that we can talk about. Of course, the overarching, do not repay anyone evil for evil. But if you go down to verse 19, here's something that is just really powerful in this. Paul writes, "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord." And so he begins, and so one of the things we need to see in this is that it is in God's job description to repay evil. He is the one who is supposed to do that, not us. right? And so he says, I've got this. You can trust me. You don't be the one that gets even or gets back. I will take care of it. Now, we need to understand in context what Paul is saying and who he's saying it to. All right? They are going through a time of incredible persecution in the Roman Empire. Christians are being arrested. Christianity is illegal. The Christians are being thrown in prison. Some of them are being killed. It's right around this time they're starting to be thrown to the lions because of their faith. It is a time when next-door neighbors and friends and family will turn their loved ones in and say, hey, they're a Christian, you need to arrest them. And you go spend time in jail, and you come out, and you are not to take revenge. Paul says it's not your place to take revenge. You need to trust God to do this. You need to be the one who gets it right and lets God be God. You see, the problem when it comes to revenge as followers of Jesus, we need to model for the world a different idea. And we say, well, but we just can't let people run over us. But you know, the founder of our faith, Sermon on the Mount, sometimes I wish he wouldn't have said this, but he said this. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Now, it could be he was joking when he said that, but I kind of think he meant it, because it's really how he lived his life. And so we look at this, and Paul says, listen, it's not your job to get even. It's not your job to attack back. That's God's job description. And so there comes a point when you just have to trust, and you have to say, God will get this right. It may be at the end of time, it may be on Judgment Day, and it may not be anything like we want it to be. But the problem is that our math is not very good, and we don't give equivalency when it comes to getting even. Now, I'm sure you've seen the video of the guy this past week who was angry that the AT&T truck was blocking part of his driveway. Did you see this? Okay. So he came out, and he was angry. If you haven't seen it, he came out, he was angry. An AT&T bucket truck was blocking part of his driveway, and he came out with a pistol. All right? And so the guy that was in the truck, he went a far distance away and began to film what was happening. And the guy looked at him, and he took the pistol, and he shot at a tire. You can hear it. He shot a tire, and you hear all the air come out. He walks around to the other side of the truck, and then he just starts shooting at the truck. He runs out of bullets, so he calmly reloads, and he starts shooting some more. Then there's another truck behind it, and he goes behind it, and he starts shooting the engine of that truck, and he just shoot, runs out of bullets, reloads again, shoots, and shoots. And so they arrest him, obviously, and they interview him and he just says, I lost it. It was like a truck was partially barking your driveway, and you lost it. Well, see, there's something about in our human nature, when it comes to getting even or getting back at people, we don't know when to stop. And so God says, listen, this is my job, not yours. And again, it's so easy to say that. And it's so easy to tell you that's what you're supposed to do, but it's a whole other thing for me to practice it, right? But as followers of Jesus, when we are well connected, that's what we do. It's the natural response of who we are as his children. And again, God didn't say it would be easy, but it's who we should be. Because the world doesn't see that. The world doesn't respond that way. When someone hurts you, you get even. And I know we can be talking about all kinds of major offenses. And there are some people who really deserve to have something difficult happen to them. I get that. But as followers of Jesus, we have to step back and we have to say, God will look at this and he will get it right. Because I think there's an underlying message in all of this, through Paul and through what Jesus taught, is that not one of us, listen to this, not one of us deserve the mercy that God has given us. Not one of us deserves forgiveness. Not one of us deserves grace. And so he says, listen, I'm keeping score. You don't have to. I've got it. Put down your notepad. Quit keeping up with it in your brain. I know everything that's happened. And if someone deserves to be punished, I promise I'll take care of it. And really, bottom line, it's really not up to you anyway. Whew. But you see, if God really is the great I am, if Jesus really is God, if he really is who he says he is, and then we really stop and we trust, he'll get it right. He will get it right. And again, please hear me say, it is so much easier to teach you this truth than it is to practice it. All right? Because I'm the guy, when somebody cuts me off in traffic, I'm thinking how I can run them off the road. And then God has to correct me. So understand and be real. And understand, back up and say, okay, God, I know you're bigger than this. And I trust you. All right, so Paul goes on, and then not only does he tell us to trust God, he tells us then what we should do. When someone offends us, when someone hurts us, when someone does things in our lives that brings us down and offends us or hurts us physically or whatever it is. Here's what he says in verse 20. He says, on the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. And here's my favorite part. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, that burning coals thing sounds really cool. All right? Can jump on board with the burning coal thing, but we need to understand historically what's going on here. Paul is quoting Proverbs 25. So we have to understand, you go back in history, and it really started with the Egyptians and it carried over to some of the Israeli communities, is when two people had a disagreement, they would go to the elders of the community and they would share the problem that they had. Now, understanding the communities were small, and when two people had a disagreement, everybody knew. Everybody knew both sides of what was going on. And so the people would agree to go to the elders of the community, and they would say, here is what's going on, here's our disagreement, here are our cases, you decide. And so the elders would talk about it, and they would come to a conclusion, and the losing side would have to take either a bucket or a shovel full of hot coals and hold it on their head and walk through the community. And what that would say to everybody in the community, and it wasn't something that was burning them, it was a sign to the community that, look, this person was wrong. This person was off base, and the other person was right. So when Paul says, listen, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. And when you do that, you'll heap burning coals on his head. You will show the world that God's way is better. You will show the world that bringing good where evil is brought. And God's design is so much better than what is natural for humanity to do. So you bring good where others bring bad. And man, the world freaks out when good happens. Have you noticed that? Did you keep up with the story in Panama City Beach where the family was caught in the riptide and they couldn't get out? And so a guy ran up and down the beach, said, come help us form a chain. And there were, I don't know how many people, probably 100 people in this chain holding on to each other so they could get to them and bring them in. And that went viral, and the world was like, wow, look at that, a hero. Something good happened. Because the world doesn't understand when good takes place. So much bad is out there. And so all of a sudden, if someone hurts you and you're feeding them when they're hungry or giving them something to drink when they're thirsty, the world goes, whoa, there's something different here. What's happening here? There must be something different about this person or these people. About 12 years ago, we had a homeless man come by the church, and he asked for a bicycle. It just so happened that in one of the back garages, we had a bicycle. It was a little broken down, and so we said, come back tomorrow and we'll get you a bicycle. So we fixed up the bicycle, and we gave it to him, and he rode off, and he seemed really happy about that. Well, the next day, he came back, and he said, I don't like this bicycle, I want a different one. I said, I'm sorry, this is the only one we have. I mean, if I had a different one, I'd give it to you, but this is it. So I don't like this one. You need to get me a different one. He said, no, you just need to work with that one. So we went away. He came back the next day. He came back again complaining about the bicycle that we had given. Don't you have another bike? Well, if you don't have another bike, you should go down the store and buy me one. I was going, now wait a minute. You have a bicycle that functions and it works. Just use it. I don't remember what it was. The handlebars were too low or something like that. And so he rode off. Well, the next day, he came by the church when nobody was looking, and he left a letter for us, telling us how horrible we were, how unlike Jesus we were. And he had very specific names that he called me and very specific names that he called Carolyn Jones, because we were the ones that were dealing with him. And he just, it was funny. We got the letter, and we looked across the street, and he was looking to make sure we got it. Didn't see him again. Didn't think much of it. 2 weeks ago, he shows back up to the church. A different bike, not one from us. 12 years later, haven't seen him. And he shows up, and we see him on the monitor, and we think, oh my gosh, that's the guy that gave us such a hard time about a bike. Now, you see that happen, and you think, revenge! Here's my chance to get back at this guy. But the Spirit of Christ said, no, that's not what we do. So, and please hear me again say, this is not something I always get right, but this is one I happen to do okay. So I had him come in, and he sat down, and he asked for food, and we gave what we had for the homeless person could use, and he asked for water. So I went and got him a water bottle, and I handed him the water bottle, and he said, just one? And I was like, okay. All right. And you were making this so hard for me. So he sat and he drank the water, and he just talked to me 15 minutes nonstop, just telling me story after story after story. They had no connection. They were, and so finally conversation ended and he left. And I walked away from that, and I thought, Lord, I just have to tell you, that was really hard. Because I wanted to open the door, I wanted to say, get out of here. Right? Leave us alone. We've done all we can do. Go away. But instead, we sat down, we talked. He went away. Don't know what his story is. He may be back next week. I don't know. But the whole point for me is I put my head on the pillow that night and didn't bother me at all. But I want to make it very clear, had I chased him away, I'd have been up all night. Because that's how the Spirit of Christ works in me. It's interesting. You think of Jesus' story, and he modeled this so well. And one of my favorite stories about him doing that was the night of the Last Supper, as he got up and he went around the room and washed his disciples' feet. And Jesus, knowing everything, I just see him going around that room and washing their feet and washing John's feet and saying, oh, John, when you're old, they're going to send you off to an island all by yourself. And you're going to spend your last days by yourself. Thank you so much. And he goes to Peter and washes his feet. And I'm sure in his mind he's thinking, Peter, one day they're going to crucify you upside down because you're going to say you're not worthy enough to be crucified the same way I was. Thank you, Peter. And he goes to James and says, James, you're going to be beheaded in just a little while. You're not going to be around much longer, but thank you for your faith and your dedication to me. And going around the room, person after person after person, who Jesus knew was going to pay the ultimate price for him, how easy it would have been to wash their feet. And then he gets to Judas. Judas Iscariot, the one he knows who's going to betray him. And I try to put myself in Jesus' spot, and I'm thinking, your stinky feet are going to stay stinky. Because I'm not washing them. But that's not what our Jesus did. He got down on his knee. He took the betrayer's feet and washed them. And he stood up and he said, do you know what I've done for you? As I've done for you, go and do to other people. Because the world doesn't understand good. And so God calls us to this life where we don't seek out revenge, where we don't seek to get even, where we trust Him to be God, and we trust Him to get it right. And we feed our enemies, we clothe our enemies, and we give them things to drink when they're thirsty. Because it changes people. And as followers of Jesus, that's who we're called to be. Whew. He never promised this thing was easy. Right? So, as I go through this journey of life and this journey of pastoring, I could tell you a lot of stories about times I've been hurt and times that have been difficult and betrayal and those sorts of things. But I want to share with you a few things that I've learned when it comes to people hurting me. The first one is that when I am angry with someone and I want to get revenge, the people that I'm angry with and want to get revenge with either have no idea that I'm angry or they don't really care. They don't know or they don't care. And the only person that's being hurt by me carrying anger is me. And that was a huge lesson for me to learn over the years. The second thing that I've learned is that I'm not God's instrument of wrath, and I shouldn't try to do His job for Him. Because there is a potential that I will overpunish someone for what they've done to me, and God forbid a potential that I'll underpunish them. So I trust Him to get it right, so I don't try to do His job for Him. And the third thing that I've discovered is that when I try to get even or I try to bring revenge on someone or I try to hurt them in some way, that the beating that I get from the Spirit of Christ is so much greater than the joy that I receive from getting even or ahead. It's not worth it. It's really not worth it. Oh, it feels good for a time, but in the long run, it's really, really not worth it. So you know me well enough and know me long enough that you know that I am very competitive, and when people hurt me, the very natural desire for me is to get even. So this is how I pray. And this is how I pray when I interact, when people have hurt me. This is how I go before the throne. And I pray very specifically, and hopefully this will help you if you are in that kind of situation. First of all, I pray that God would love the person through me. Secondly, I pray that God would bless the person. Thirdly, I pray and I tell God that I surrender any perceived right that I have to judge the person. And those words are very important for me because I have no right. But I give up any perceived right that I have to judge the person. And the fourth thing I pray, and this is big, Lord, help me believe this prayer. Because my heart's not in it right now. But I thank you that you're greater than my heart. So please change me. Now here's what I've noticed in that journey, is sometimes it only takes a few days of prayer like that and it's awesome. Sometimes it takes a few weeks. Sometimes it takes a few months. Sometimes it takes a few years. And sometimes I'll let you know when it happens. But there's this amazing transformational power that God brings in our lives that sets us free from our anger and our desire to get revenge. And oh my goodness, the world so desperately needs to see good in the midst of evil. So I encourage you, as I encourage me, and it challenge us, there are a lot of things that we can be angry about. There are a lot of hurts that have happened in our lives, and I know that. Some of your stories I know, and you have been much bigger people than me in many of those situations. But I pray and I encourage us that somehow we can stop and let God be God and know that He'll get it right. Let's pray.